9. This one is on factoring trinomials. Now, let's review quickly what a trinomial is. You've heard of monomial, binomial, and then trinomials. Basically, this is an example of a trinomial, okay? This one alone would be a monomial, just one number letter. Then when you have this plus, this would be 2. This would be a binomial. And then since there's 1, 2, 3, then it's called a trinomial, okay? So you're learning how to factor a trinomial. Factor always means, just think of the factor tree. You're breaking down something, okay? So when I'm factoring trinomials, I'm going to break down this trinomial. Now, let me show you the first example. Go and go to example 69.1. I'm not going to run through all the other stuff that they talk about. It seems a little bit more confusing. So, let's just break this down. Here's what it says. Factor x squared minus 14x minus 15. Now, what they're wanting you to do is to come up with two separate equations that when they're multiplied, it equals this. Now, I'll explain to you what I mean by that. So, just watch what I do for just a minute, and then we'll kind of walk through it and how it makes sense, okay? Now, I'm going to break this up, x squared, since there's 2 of them, then I'm going to put 1x here and 1x here, and that breaks that up, okay? Now, the next thing I want to look at is the ending one, okay? And I want to ask myself, what times what would equal 15, but then when it is added or subtracted would equal 14? So stay with me. What times what would equal 15, but then added or subtracted would equal 14? So let's try. What if I said 5 times 3? 5 times 3 gives me 15. But if I added 5 plus 3, would it give me 14? No. If I did 5 minus 3, would it give me 14? No. So 5 and 3 do not work. We have to think of 2 more numbers. Well, 15 and 1 are numbers that would go 15 times 1 would equal 15. Yeah. Well, would 15 plus 1 give me 14? No, but would 15 minus 1 give me 14? Yeah. Yes. Okay, so we've got the correct numbers. Now you have to decide, what am I going to put in the middle, a plus or a minus? Okay, could be 2 pluses, it could be 2 minuses, could be 1 plus and 1 minus. So what you're going to ask yourself, now, first thing I'm going to do is make this a plus negative and a plus negative. Just because I work better like that, you don't have to. Okay? In order for me to get a negative 14, I have to subtract, right? 15 minus 1 will give me 14. And if you remember the rules on adding and subtracting positive and negative numbers, when we subtract, then we take the sign of the larger number. So I want to have a negative here. Why? Because a negative 15 and then a positive 1 would give me, it would make me subtract and take the sign of the biggest number. Negative 15 plus negative. See what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Okay, so now if you don't understand what I just said, you can just try it. Put a plus there, put a minus there, and then just try it. Okay, so now what I'm going to do, I'm going to check to see if this is correct. Okay, this is factored, so now let's check it and see if we're correct. We're going to start with the x, and you're going to multiply it by the first x, which gives you x squared, right? X times x is x squared. Okay, now we're going to take and do this. X times 1 is 1x, and everything is plus after this, okay? And I do a plus. Now I'm done with this one. Now I'm going to do this one. Negative 15 times x gives me negative 15x, right? Just brings them together. Plus, negative 15 times 1 is negative 15. All right, now we take our like terms, 1x and negative 15x, and it makes it negative 14x, right? Yeah. We're done with that. And then we just bring everything else down. Now, you ask yourself, does this match this? X squared plus negative 14x plus negative 15? Yes. That means that these numbers are correct. Okay? So that's all we had to do to figure out that. All right? Now, let's try another one just to make sure you're getting it. Okay? Do not just stop and turn it off, because this is important that you know what's going on this next one, okay? So x squared plus 3x plus a negative 10. Now, I changed this to a plus negative. It was just minus 10, okay? Now, let's try this. Okay, what makes x squared? X and x. What can I multiply blank times blank that would equal 10? 5 and 2, right? Because 5 times 2 is 10, and then if I add or subtract 5 and 2, it would give me 3, right? So let's try this, okay? Now basically what I'm asking myself is, what can equal a positive 3? Okay? Well, here's our numbers, 5 and 2. To get a positive 3, then I would need a negative 2, okay? To then take 5 minus 2, get 3, and then I take the sign of the biggest number, which is 5. So that gives me a positive 3. Okay? So then that shows me that I'm going to put a plus there and a minus there. Okay? Now, this next one that we're looking at, so this is correct, and if you want to check it, again, you can go x times that, it goes x squared, plus x times that, that's going to be negative 2x, and you're going to look at this one and go 5 times x is 5x, oops, I forgot to put a plus, and then 5 times negative 2 would be negative 10. Okay, like terms would give me a 3x right there, and then I just bring everything else down. Does this match this? Yes, it does. I know I've gotten it right. Okay, now really pay attention to this next one because it changes it up just a tad. Negative 5x plus x squared plus 6. Okay, what do you think would be the easiest thing to do here? You're definitely going to have to put it in the form that we had originally. You always want to have x squared, x, and then the number.
Just swap the x
so you can just swap it. As long as you've got this plus in the middle, if you have a minus, you're going to go in and change it to a plus negative. Okay, so we do have pluses, so we can just rearrange. Okay, so I'm going to go x squared is first, then negative 5x is next, and then 6 is last. So this is rewritten the way I like to see it, and that's the best way to work it. Okay, and then you just work it just like normal, x and x. Now this next one's a little tricky because I could use two numbers, so pay attention to this. I could use a 1 and a 6 because 1 times 6 equals 6. And 6 and 1, if I subtracted it, I could get a 5. But I want you to see that this actually does not work, and let me show you why. Because, okay, I can take 6 times 1 and get 6, okay? But can I get a negative 5? Well, the only way to get a negative 5, here I have a 6 and a 1. In order for me to get a negative 5, I would have to subtract. That means I would have to have opposite signs. Okay? And so, a 6 and a 1, let's just say I had a negative 6 and a positive 1, that would give me a negative 5. That's good. Okay? But, if I were to put a positive 1 and a negative 6, then when I multiply 1 times 6, check out what happens. Let me make this a plus negative. Negative 6 and a positive 1 makes a negative 6 answer. Guess what that means? 6 and 1 do not work. Okay? So then you have to start all over. I couldn't come up with something that would work there. So now, it must be a different pattern, a different way. So, will 2 and 3 work? Well, let's try that out. 2 and 3. Well, 2 times 3 is 6, and we could come up with 2 plus 3 to get 5, so we may be onto something. So, we take 2 and 3, our numbers. In order for me to get a negative 5, I would have to have a negative 2 plus a negative 3 to equal a negative 5, correct? So, negative, negative. Now, let's see if that works. In order to get a positive 6, if I have a negative 2 times a negative 3, it's going to give me a positive 6. Yay! We figured it out. So I'm going to go and change these to plus negative. You see what I mean by that? Because two negatives, their even number of negatives, makes a positive answer. And then when you add negative 3 and negative 2, it gives you a negative 5. So we finally got the right one. Even though 6 and 1 we thought would work, it didn't. Okay, so now let's do this. X times x would be x squared, plus x times negative 3 would be negative 3x, plus, let's do this one, negative 2 times x is negative 2x, and negative 2 times negative 3 is a positive 6. Alright, we add our like terms. Negative 3 and negative 2 makes a negative 5x, and we do end up with the exact, so we know that this, our factoring, is correct. Alright? Alright, that is lesson 69.